You know, most people think that sauna or cold plunge works best on its own. But what if I told you the real magic happens when you combine them, jumping between extreme cold and intense heat? And that's contrast therapy, and it unlocks unique benefits you just can't get from hot or cold alone. And I've been testing contrast therapy for years using different cold plunges, infrared saunas, traditional saunas, steam rooms, while tracking sleep, recovery, and even my blood markers. There are two questions really that I get a lot is A, what can I do? Traditional saunas are incredibly expensive, I can't afford one. And B, if I opt for an infrared sauna, is it hot enough? Is it enough for contrast therapy? Because if you go from very cold to 140 degrees in an infrared sauna, it might take you forever to warm up again. So those are some of the questions that I'm gonna address in this video. We'll talk about the contrast therapy benefits and what it means exactly, what the temperature difference has to be for optimal benefits. We're gonna talk about cold and heat shock proteins and their role in immunity. And of course, we're gonna talk about what sauna type works best, depending on what goals you're after, because there's a lot of nuance. There is no, easy black or white type of solution. It depends on a lot of things that we'll discuss in this video. Now, if you want more science-backed breakdowns like this, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next experiment. With that, let's talk about contrast therapy and why it works. Contrast therapy basically means alternating between hot and cold exposure, meaning sauna and cold plunging. Well, it could be sauna and cold shower, but in most of the sauna culture, like in Scandinavia, it means a sauna and then a cold plunge, a dip into the cold ocean, or maybe a cold plunge tub that you might have at home. And when you cold plunge, your blood vessels squeeze very tight. They constrict. And when you go into a sauna, when you expose yourself to high temperatures, they open up wide. And that switching back and forth acts like a pump of your circulatory system and has a lot of benefits, including reduced muscle soreness and inflammation, faster recovery of strength and power, and improved cardiovascular health and circulation. Because at the end of the day, this, back and forth is like a workout for your blood vessels and for your heart as well, because it has to pump harder and a little less, etc., etc. Now, here is one part that's often overlooked in the context of contrast therapy, and then we'll get into the different sauna types. And that is cold exposure increases cold shock proteins. And those are proteins, as the name implies, that help repair and protect neurons and boost stress resilience. They also improve or help the immune system be more effective. Heat, on the other hand, or heat exposure, increases heat shock proteins. So they're very similar, but they're specifically they're like the cellular firefighters that help repair damaged proteins, reduce inflammation, and support the immune system as well. And switching between hot and cold amplifies both systems, so you really get a double workout for your immune system. And that's a great thing, and it makes the entire sauna experience so much more beneficial than if you just do the sauna and nothing else, and then you go and take a hot shower. Now, the question with contrast therapy is, how much of a temperature difference do you need to have? Is it enough to go from 50-degree cold water into a sauna that's, maybe 120 degrees, especially if it's an infrared sauna? And so based on the research I've seen, you want to have at least a gap of 100 degrees Fahrenheit or 35 degrees Celsius for maximum effects. So for example, if your cold plunge is at 40 degrees Fahrenheit, then going into a sauna that's 140 degrees hot is good, but it depends on the type of sauna. It's good for an infrared sauna, but I would argue for a traditional sauna, I would opt for more like 180 degrees plus, maybe even to 200 degrees Fahrenheit to really get a solid temperature delta and difference. But again, it depends on whether or not you're using a traditional or infrared sauna. And so let's talk about this, because this is really important, and there's a lot of information out there, or a lot of myths and misconceptions that surround infrared versus traditional saunas. And what you need to understand is that those two sauna types dump energy in the form of heat into your tissue in different ways. Traditional saunas use hot air, right, to transfer the heat through the skin into your muscle tissue with the purpose of increasing your core temperature and circulation, etc. The thing is that air is a relatively poor conductor of heat, so you need, relatively speaking, higher temperatures to get the same amount of energy into your tissue compared to if you use light, be it visible or invisible light. So in most infrared saunas, they operate in the invisible spectrum. I mean, there are some that have red light as well to include some visible light, but most of the energy benefits, or most of the benefits benefits from an infrared sauna you get from invisible light frequencies that are much more capable at lower temperatures to deliver the same amount of energy into your tissue as hot air. And that's why infrared saunas can operate at lower temperatures, typically around, I would say at a minimum 120 degrees Fahrenheit. One of the saunas I have goes up until 170 degrees. So very much into traditional sauna territory. Within that span, 120 to 170, let's say, you get the same energy into your tissue as with hot air that's significantly hotter. So from that perspective, they are very much comparable. Now, but the thing here is, one thing that I've noticed is when I go from a cold plunge that's maybe at the freezing point, where I sit in water that has ice floating around, so water that's 33 degrees cold. If I then go into a sauna, I need significant heat to get my core temperature back up and get sweating again and to close or to open my pores again. And so I've noticed that that works for me best when I'm in a traditional sauna, where I can pour water over the sauna rocks, increase the humidity, because humidity conducts temperature better than just dry hot air. That's why it feels nicer outside in the heat when it's dry versus when it's very humid. And so that works for me best. Very high temperatures, like at 230 degrees Fahrenheit, it immediately gets me back to sweating again and gets the heat shock proteins released again, gets my blood vessels dilated. And the thing is, that approach I've seen is maybe a little bit less tolerable for beginners who are not used to those high heat, thick, humid, moist environments. And it obviously requires more energy in the form of electricity. If you have an electrical heater, you need a very, very powerful electrical heater, like an 11 kilowatt heater or so, obviously also depending on the size of your sauna. But the one sauna we have has 11 kilowatts heater. That sucks a lot of energy. If you have a wood stove, you need wood, to get that heat up and maintain that high temperature. On the flip side, if you use an infrared sauna, it might take you a little longer to heat back up. I guess it's a gentler heat, if you will. So you need to stay in a little bit longer, but it also, requires less temperature, and it might be more compatible with people who are not used to those extreme temperature differences. So if you're a beginner and, you don't want to kill yourself in the sauna, then the infrared sauna might be a good approach. But again, it takes longer for your core temperature to heat up again. And also it makes a difference how far away from the heating elements you sit. You really want to be close to those heaters, because especially the near infrared, if you have a full spectrum infrared saunas, has a very short effective range. So you really want to be close to the heating panel. Now, overall, I want to say contrast therapy is very much doable with an infrared sauna, but I think it's easier, it's more effective, and it's quicker if you have a traditional sauna. And I know, most traditional saunas, if you look at barrel saunas, etc., they cost thousands and thousands of dollars. And you might say, well, it's great, but I don't have the budget to get a sauna that costs thousands of dollars. Well, I have good news for you. The sponsor of this video is Sweat Tent, and they make, as the name implies, a tent, a sweat tent. It's a sauna that fits 4 people. 4 adults can sit comfortably in that sauna. It comes with a wood stove that heats up incredibly quickly. I was skeptical about wood stoves because I thought, making a fire every single time I want to use the sauna gets old very quickly. Takes me forever. It does not. Just based on the design of that wood stove, the fire lights up quickly and it's hot 200 degrees in only 20 minutes. And if you wait a little longer, you reach 230 degrees. That's the hottest I've gotten it in that sauna. It's incredibly hot, and it's my favorite way of doing contrast therapy, because you get in out of the cold into that sweat tent and you pour some water over the sauna rocks, and combined with the incredibly hot heat that you have already in the tent, add some moisture and you get back to sweating in no time. It takes less than 15 minutes to want you to get out of the sweat tent and into the cold again, because it's just so incredibly hot. And that's why I absolutely love Sweat Tent, and I encourage you to check out my dedicated review. I'm going to link it down below. We also have discount codes that we're going to put in the description, so check it out. Thanks for Sweat Tent for sponsoring this video. It's one of my favorite ways to do contrast therapy. Now, with that, let's talk about how you can make contrast therapy part of your regular routine. I really highly recommend you, if you're into sauna bathing in one shape or form, or if you're into cold plunging, to combine those two for maximum benefit. Aim for at least 100 degrees Fahrenheit difference between the hot and the cold. The more, the better. Within reason, obviously. You don't have to overdo anything. You don't have to sit into water that's at the freezing point, and you don't have to be at 230 degrees Fahrenheit either. The cold really depends on your cold perception and how used you are to the cold. So use something that's uncomfortable but doable. And on the sauna, go as hot as it's doable for you. It doesn't have to be comfortable necessarily. It should be uncomfortable to a degree. If you really want to push your body and get those heat and cold shock proteins released, do it in a way that's safe and it's doable for you. And then go back and forth, maybe 2 times, maybe 3 times. If you have the time, maybe 4 times. For me, 15 minutes hot, 2 minutes cold, or even only 1 minute cold. And they'll go back and forth. It might take you then, if you do 2 rounds, might take you just over half an hour. And that's one of the best things you can do to support your health and longevity and reduce the risk of getting sick. And with the sweat tent in particular, if you only want to use it during the colder months of the year, maybe from fall to early spring or so, you can pack it up and just put it to the side. You don't have to have it there permanently. That's what we do actually. We put it up in fall and we remove it in late spring when it gets hot out here, because in summer we typically don't use the sauna very much. I just have to step outside and I sweat like a pig. But now I'd like to hear from you. What matters more to you? Maximizing immune resilience with strong shock protein activation, or having a practical, easy to use setup? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Send this video to someone who could use it, and let me know maybe also if you've been using or if you've been doing contrast therapy with infrared saunas. How did that go? What is your trick to heat up quickly after getting out of the cold? Let me know. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time.